All right. Thank you, guys. It's exactly 5 minutes after 5, and we're going to jump in right away. Today's class, we're going to be talking about the legislative. It's a very interesting class. There are a lot of things you might not know about the legislative. Okay, but this class is going to expose and, of course, give you an insight to understand what the legislative is all about. So I urge you to pay attention. And when it's time to ask for questions, please ask questions, right? Ask any question that comes to your mind. Ask questions. Our facilitator is well loaded today. So I'm going to read out her profile, and then I'm going to hand over the stage to her. Our facilitator today is Nella Andem Ewa. Nella Andem Ewa is a cross-sectional policy and legal professional with vast experience in various fields, including policy advisory, litigation, commercial law, communications, and the non-governmental sector. She's a special advisor of policy and communications in the senator representing Cross River South Senatorial District and a partner at Lex Global Partners. She has been the communication officer at a non-governmental organization which successfully initiated several community projects and associate at a top-tier Nigerian litigation commercial law. She believes that access to quality health and lifelong education, fair work opportunities, and inclusive as well as protective institutions would contribute immensely to creating the critical mass that will drive Nigeria's change. She's currently Deputy Executive Director of Electoral College of Nigeria, an active member of Rotary International, and a fellow of the 2021 Electoral Future Lawmakers Program, the inaugural cohort. Nella holds an LLB Honours Law from the University of Edinburgh, United Kingdom, and has been called to the Nigerian Bar Association. She was an aspirant and a runner-up for the Cross River State House of Assembly, Calabar South Constituency 1C in the recently concluded party primaries under the platform of the People's Democratic Party. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I want to hand over the virtual stage to Nella, and you're welcome.
Thank you, Burton. Good evening, everyone. Happy birthday, Lisa. So it's always a pleasure to take this class. This is, I think, the ninth cohort. So this is the ninth legislative class I've taught, and it's always a privilege and honor to do this. So I think we'll just jump in. Can the slides be? So is someone sharing the slides? Okay, I think the host needs to allow me share the slides, please.
Bini, you're not a co-host. You can share your screen.
Okay. It's loading now. I think he was sharing it, but it's gone off now. Okay, while that's up, can everyone hear me clearly? I think someone said they can't hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. I guess maybe it's a problem.
I think, no, someone said they couldn't hear me. That was quite faint. Okay.
Oh, no,
So
very loud.
The slides come up. Thank you. Apologies, everyone. I think we're trying to get the slides up. So once that's on, we'll go forward. Okay, it's coming back on. Okay, perfect. Okay, so once again, welcome everyone. This is the class on the legislative arm of government, or the legislature. So please, next slide. Okay, so the government is made up of different arms of government, three specifically. You have the executive, which is headed by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. You have the legislative arm of government, which in Nigeria and at the federal level is split into two. You have the Senate and the House of Representatives, but collectively they are the National Assembly. So the Nigeria National Assembly, it's a bicameral legislature. Some countries have unicameral, which is one house. We have two. And we'll go into detail about that as we go on. And then the final arm is the judiciary. If you notice, there is a wider gap between the judiciary and the others, and that is because the judiciary it's not an elective arm. They are appointed, while at least the heads of the executive and the legislative arm are elected by the people. So that's where the representation is supposed to come in. Next slide. Please, the next slide. Thank you. So an English philosopher said, if the same person has the power to make laws and execute them, they may exempt themselves from the laws they make and use the law to their own private advantage. That's what separation of powers avoids. So instead of having a government where everything is just under one arm, one structure, one ecosystem, you have three branches. And at the center of that, in my opinion, is the people, because the people are supposed to be sovereign. So the electorate, and those arms are supposed to be accountable to each other, as well as to the people, which is basically the arrow in the middle. So this tributary sort of an imagery of what separation of powers is supposed to be. You have three different arms flowing from the center, and that center is the people, in theory. Please, the next slide. So this is also another quote, but this time from a French philosopher. He said, constant experience has shown that every man invested with power is apt to abuse it and to carry his authority as far as it will go. Again, that is what separation of powers is supposed to avoid. It's supposed to ensure that no one arm of government has more powers than the other in terms of exerting absolute power, while it also serves to be accountable to the others, while those other arms are accountable to that arm. So no one arm can function in isolation and in absolute power without the others checking it. That is supposed to be an ideal government, but we don't live in an ideal world. Next slide. So why are we taking this specific class in the general politeracy class? Why do we need to know about the legislative arm of government? Why do we need to even know about the arms of government? What does that mean to us as individuals, as the electorate, as people who are maybe planning to run for office? And part of it is the next slide answers that in a way, but that question is supposed to be a poser. So as we go along the class, you ask yourself those questions. But it says powerful people cannot afford to educate the people that they oppress, because once you are truly educated, you will not ask for power, you will take it. You will not ask to be helped, you would help yourself. You will not ask to be well represented, you will ensure that you are well represented. But if you are not aware of your rights, your civic responsibilities, your even the embedded principles in the Constitution or the embedded powers you have as the people in the Constitution, then anything goes. But I think in a way, what's also important is if we do not know what we stand for as a collective and as individuals, then we can't really fight for anything. I'll try not to philosophize too much because this is just a class on the legislature, but I think these are poses that we should always ask ourselves. Next slide. So now more to the issue of the day, the legislative arm of government. So we have the legislative houses in Nigeria, and there are 3 tiers of government here. So we have the national or the federal, then we have the state, and we have the local government. At the national, as I said, we have the National Assembly, which is made up of 2 houses or 2 chambers, the green and red, the upper and the lower and the upper, or the House of Reps and the Senate. Then we have the State House of Assemblies, which means that there are 36 House of Assemblies. FCT is not a state, so it doesn't have a House of Assembly. It's represented by the legislators in the National Assembly because it is a territory, is not a state. Then you have the local government legislative councils, meaning each local government is meant to have their respective councils, and there you have councillors as your legislators. But this class will only focus on the national and state. There is a class on local government as we go along. So just before we go into the National Assembly and State House of Assemblies, what are the barriers to entry or the enablers actually to become a legislator? As was introduced, I ran for office. So I think I got to see certain things, and I felt this might be at least a broad way to exemplify what one could either encounter as an obstacle or even something that could help when running for office. So I divided it into 4. This is following a theory called the pathetic dot, which says anything can be regulated by 4 modalities. You have your social or cultural influences, you have the law, you have architecture, which is the structural barriers or enablers, and then you have the markets, which are market forces or the economy. In speaking on the social and cultural issues, for example, in a community where maybe young people or women or people of a certain social economic class are not common leaders, it would be difficult to enter that space. You would have a lot more to prove than someone or people who are considered as natural leaders. And even there's certain things you have to do. For example, if you're going to consult, there are certain bottle types of drinks you can take, certain things you have to take based on the cultural intricacies of the specific. So one local government has certain requirements and you go to the next neighboring local government and it's something completely different. So if you are considering going into office, you need to know those things. You don't say it's culture, but that's different. This one is, but it's all in the same. Culture plays a massive role in politics and in the electoral process. And even when you get into office, you need to understand the unique issues of the historic and cultural issues within your constituency. Then you have the legal requirements. These are like things such as the minimum age or what your minimum educational qualification, or what the law says about where you're from and citizenship, things like that. Those are some of the basic barriers. You can even the regulations, specific party constitutions and regulations, those are also part of the legal requirements or legal barriers or enablers to entry. Then you have market forces. Now this is for me, I find it quite interesting because it's 2 ways. You have market forces normally have supply and demand. In an election or in the electoral process along the cycle, you find that whoever has the money or a lot of money, sometimes it's easier to get things done. on the ground. And that also plays a role. That happens because, unfortunately, the economic situation in Nigeria is not as it should be. So, for example, you have an electorate who would willingly take, say, 5,000 naira, 10,000 naira on the day, as opposed to demanding consistent and continuous impact. But the issue is, I am hungry today. I need to pay a medical bill today. You will not show up again. So I will take that money which you are supplying now to fulfill the demands I have right now. And I wouldn't demand much of you later. It's a trade-off. But for us to understand, because we say, oh, why are people selling their votes or selling their rights or selling, but you have to address the why, not the how. But so until we get to the root of the issue, it will keep happening. It will not go away overnight. And there's as we go on, there is even sort of a theory that explains that. Then you have constituency, which also plays a role in the architecture, which also is influenced by the constituency. So you have, these are structural limitations. So if you're, for example, running for office in a riverine area, getting to that location will be a lot more complicated than someone who's running for office in a town, in a metropolitan area or a city. Or if if your constituency is at night, there's a lot of crime, there's a high crime rate, or there's a lot of violence, even outside of the political season. Now that may be a bit more tricky, moving around or getting out at night. These are just some of the structural issues, but in a general sense, it helps to break down what these issues could be. I mean, this particular theory, we can come up with so many examples, but we have a limited time, so I just thought it would be a good thing to touch on. Please, next slide. So now, National Assembly. This is the federal arm of government, and federal arm of the legislative arm of government. Please, the next slide. Yes, so here you have two pictures. One to the left, you have people in an assembly deliberating on issues. And in the other picture, you have people who have also formed some form of assembly or association or group, and they are agitating for something. Now, there is supposed to be a collective goal or interest between the two, but these two groups, you can ask yourself, are they both entitled to vote in 2023? Well, if they have their let's say they all have their PVCs, are they entitled to vote in 2023? Yes. Are they all free citizens? Yes. But the difference is, on one side, these are people who have been put in those positions to argue, deliberate, and resolve the issues based on the concerns and needs of the people. While on the other hand, people have taken matters into their own hands for whatever reason, a lot of the time because people in the other picture have not done what was meant to be done or what was asked of them. And these people who probably put them in office have to take matters into their own hands. And sometimes these end up in their acts of violence, and things don't get resolved. So the question is, why can't we resolve things in the first picture first? For thought. Next question. Next slide, rather. So National Assembly is divided into two. We have the Senate and the House of Reps. Then the Senate has 3 senators per state, so 109 total senators. And each senator, 3 senators represent each state, while 1 senator represents the Federal Capital Territory, as explained earlier. So total, that's 109. The leader of the Senate is the Senate President, and his deputy is the Deputy Senate President. But the leader of the Senate also acts as the chairman of the National Assembly. So he's the head of the National Assembly as well. The Senate is supposed to represent or symbolize equal representation of 36 states. that make up the federation. So this is more about the equality of the states, regardless of size or population number. Please, next slide. Please, the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so now we have the House of Representatives, which is the green chamber. The other is the red chamber, green chamber. This is a more equitable representation, if you will. Here you have 360 members representing constituencies of nearly equal population across the country. And then no constituency can fall within more than one state, because otherwise that would be, you are represented twice, which doesn't help in terms of the equity issue. The leader is the speaker and deputy speaker. There are other principal officers, but these are the highest positions. So representation here is based on proportionate direct/direct representation of the people, as its membership is based on the population and the number of constituencies in each state. While the Senate represents while the Senate is supposed to be equal representation of all the states, the House of Representatives is equitable or equal representation, rather proportionate representation based on the population of each constituency. So at the House, while the Senate is supposed to ensure that all the states are equally represented, the House of Representatives ensures that all constituencies are fairly represented. So one argues there are a lot of the time you have arguments regarding the two houses. Why do we have two houses as opposed to one? This is one of the reasons. One house is supposed to represent all states equally, while the other house is supposed to represent all constituencies equally. So in each state, you have various constituencies, and each of them are represented by someone, so that everyone, at least somehow, is fairly represented. Because you can have a state that is very small, and that state has 3 senators, and a state that is very large has 3 senators as well. But now, where it is fairly represented or broken down a bit is at the House of Reps. So now each constituency will now be properly represented, and the demarcations are done a bit, a lot more fairer or proportionate. So that is why one is the proportional representation, while one is equal representation. Next slide. Okay, you're there already. Now, before we go to the State House of Assemblies, there are legislative lists. We have the exclusive list and concurrent list, and we also have a residual list. But in the Constitution, you have the exclusive legislative list, which is basically the list that provides for the powers that are assigned to the National Assembly, to the exclusion of the State House of Assemblies and the local government. This is strictly for the Federal House of the Federal Legislative House. Now, there are arguments as to devolution of power, why some powers should be devolved to the states. That's an argument. But there are 68 items currently on the exclusive list, and these are to the exclusion of the State House of Assemblies. You have the concurrent list. Now, this is where powers are assigned to both the National Assembly and the House of Assembly of the states to make their laws respectively. However, the legislative powers of the National Assembly always supersede that of the State House of Assembly. So, for instance, if there is a law, an act, acts are for national, laws are for state. If there is an act that has been passed by the National Assembly, and the State House of Assembly passes a law that is in contravention with the act that was passed, automatically the National Assembly Act would supersede and override that. So that will not happen, or that would not work. That's also supposed to protect the supremacy of the National Assembly and just ensure that there's order. The residual list is basically any item that is not found on the concurrent list or the exclusive list, and then those powers are with the state. However, the local government derives its powers from the state as well. But that you go more into detail with the in the class on the local government. So yes, so the House of Assembly. Now this is normally you have legislators who are normally about 3 or 4 times the number of those that you have at the House of Representatives. So for instance, you have, let's take a state, for example, Cross River, you have 25 constituencies at the State House of Assembly, as opposed to 8 at the House of Representatives. That just shows the difference in the number of seats available. Now, each House of Assembly is divided into, sorry, excuse me. Okay, sorry. Each House of Assembly is divided into in a way that reflects equal population to truly reflect proper representation of every constituency within that state, similar to the House of Representatives. So if you had to say which house at the federal level is similar to that at the state level, you would say the House of Representatives, because that's more proportionate as opposed to the equality of representation. Then it's headed by the Speaker and Deputy Speaker. The Federal Capital Territory, as I already said, doesn't have a State House of Assembly because it is a capital territory. It's a federal territory rather, so it is represented by those who represent it at the national level, the legislators at the national level. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just quickly, procedural requirements to become a legislator. You have, you must be a Nigerian citizen, 30 for Senate, 25 for House of Reps and House of Assembly. Thankfully, because of the Not Too Young to Run Act, these ages have been stepped down by 5 years each. You have school certificate level education, a member of a political party, and you should be sponsored. You must be sponsored by that party. There are agitations for independent candidacy. Conviction, that you've been sentenced to death or imprisonment for fraud or something of the sort. If you're a non-discharged bankrupt, several issues, it's there, and I think it was also in the notes, so we don't waste time. Next slide, please. So going Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Right.
I think I got cut off a bit. Okay.
Yeah.
You can hear me now? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So a day in a life. Please, next slide. Please, can I get the next slide? Thank you. Thank you. So there are several functions of a legislator, but if you want to group them, there are 3 basic functions. You have to make laws. Someone says they can't hear me. Oh, I'm not loud enough, I think.
Yeah, I think I can hear you loud and clear. Maybe that's a problem from his end, and I think other people can hear you. So, yeah.
Okay, so yes, to make laws, oversight functions. Okay, you can hear me. Representation. Those are if you want to break them into 3, those are the 3 broad functions. So now we'll take each of them. There, as I had said earlier, which sort of explains that those market forces. Sorry, next slide, please. Those market forces, you have, please, the next slide. Yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this theory argues that humans are driven by their innate need for survival, safety, love, belonging, esteem, self-realization, in that order. So without understanding human motivation, we can't really explain our actions. So if at the basic level, someone is still looking for food, for water, for where to sleep, for their sexual needs, for sanitation needs, how is that person supposed to, or why would that, not how, why would that person start thinking of self-esteem and respect for others, and or even want to go up a level, morality and being creative and experiencing this, I guess, out of body experiences where you feel, I am a philosopher, and you are reading Aristotle and things like that. If you cannot figure out how to eat or where you will find your next meal, or if your child is sick, how you would take care of that child, or you can see a hospital, you go to the hospital and there are no facilities, or you have to pay an extortionate amount of money to get treatment. Doesn't that kind of explain why, at least to an extent, or at least contributes to why our politics is played the way it is? If people are not, if over 90 million people are living below the poverty line, and more are going to join that number very soon if things are not improved on, then how can we have a political system that is grounded and based on ideological thought and different reasonings that actually drive change? It will constantly be based on food on the table or financial exchanges, because a person is hungry, his family or her family is hungry. To me, I think if we can see that, then a lot of things become easier to understand, and then we can maybe start driving at fixing the issues and demanding more from those who are supposed to represent us, or are saying they want to represent us next year. Please, next slide. So the first function, to make laws. At the national level, they pass bills which eventually become acts. At the state level, they pass laws which eventually, they pass bills as well, which eventually become laws. Next slide. And that's just a picture of it. I sent the slides, if you open it up on your computer, you will see it, but that's just a sample. It was just for effect. I can send samples of bills to the group later. So now this picture. Yes, if you are a legislator, so put yourself in the role, in the seat of a legislator, and this is, broadly speaking, the makeup of your constituency: rice farmers, different types of farmers. And maybe it's not the most well-drained community. Water supply is very limited and expensive, and there's no access to electricity. Can you go to the next slide? So now you have a choice. Let's say you're somehow presented with a choice, or you on your own wake up and you have this epiphany of, oh, I can seek to pass 2 bills. One of this, there's only enough resources for one, or there's only enough time to sponsor one, arguably. Which one should I go for? So the first one is a research institute. Agricultural Research Institute, while the second one is a system that would ensure proper irrigation in the various farms across the constituency, and specifically maybe for rice farmers who would be able to have proper, well-irrigated rice farms, rice paddy farms. As a legislator, which one would you consider more pressing? This is a bit different because both of them are arguably good projects that you would be good to embark on, or policies that you would be good to embark on. But if you are going to present a bill for one of the two, which would it be? Okay, someone has said irrigation system before research institute. Okay, so you can answer in the comment section. So please, the next slide. So irrigation system. Now, since everyone has said irrigation system, we will use that as sort of a template for how to pass a bill. So let's say the irrigation system, as a legislator, you are not going to provide an irrigation system. That is not your job. If you are campaigning and you're saying, I'm going to ensure farmers have an irrigation system, sure, you can fight for it, but you are not the one that's going to. Someone says my network is breaking. Is it okay now?
No, your network is not breaking. I guess it's a problem from his end. You are very loud and clear. Yeah. Sorry,
Uchechi. So yeah, what was I saying? If you have as a legislator, it's not your role to provide an irrigation system. It's not your role to provide electricity for your community. It's not like personally, that's not what you are going to do. That's the job of the executive. It's not your role to provide wells for proper irrigation. That's not your job. But what you can do is through consultations with various stakeholders or interest groups. For example, you can have this bill could have been brought to you by a CSO, that's a civil society organization that let's call them Water for Farmers Foundation. So they're really pushing for better farming technology and techniques, and there are certain loopholes in the existing legal framework that wouldn't allow farmers use their own electricity or generate them, which at least thankfully we seem like we are getting past that at some point in Nigeria. But let's just say we are still there, and no one has thought of decentralizing or democratizing electricity. And these guys have thought of a very fantastic, economically savvy, socially beneficial, environmentally friendly, fantastic way to provide decentralized electricity, which will allow farmers pump water from their artisan wells and irrigate their tiny subsistence farms. And some of them are now beginning to would be able to come together and form cooperatives and blah blah blah, blah long story. But the point is that it's a bill that has been brought to you. So now that's considered a public bill, but only a member can present a bill on the floor of the House. So even if a bill comes from a CSO, that a CSO lobbies a legislator who has an interest in that field, it would interest its constituency or benefit its constituency, only that member can move or sponsor such a bill. So you take that bill on. So now we are in the role of that legislator. We've come up with this bill. Let's call it the Farmers Protection, for the sake of this Farmers Protection Bill. So we have, and all these things we have discussed are and they're itemized in the bill. How we'll go about it is provided in the bill, and this will now provide the executive with the powers to implement this at their own various levels. So the first stage is the first reading. So we have the first reading. At this stage, think I cut off. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I think I cut off.
Yeah, loud and clear. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. It said my network was okay. So first we have the first reading. Well, before that, the bill is the Rules and Business Committee. They have to review. If let's use the National Assembly as an example. So you're a federal legislator, you're a senator. So you are in the Senate. So the Committee on Rules and Business, the bill will be sent there. They will have to look at the bill, make sure it's suitable. It doesn't, it's not in contravention with public policy and security, any security issues. It's fine. If there are issues, it will be adjusted. So once the bill is cleaned, redrafted, it's good to go. You get to the first reading. At this stage, the bill is just introduced by the clerk of the Senate, because that's the house that it's originating from. And the short title is read, which is the Farmers Protection Bill, blah, blah, blah. Then a date is set for the second reading. Between the first reading and second reading, the legislators are meant to peruse the bill and ensure that it is based on their respective interests, come up with arguments for and against. And usually a bill is co-sponsored. So you'd have the sponsor of the bill, which would be a farmer-friendly senator. And then you have fellow senators who buy into that agenda, or who buy into the bill, or who have been successfully lobbied by either that senator or the CSOs. So at least, because then you're already sure of a certain number of votes, which that's just how it works. So the second reading, at that stage, the bill, this is where arguments are put forward. So whoever reads them, this farmer-friendly senator would lead the debate. So he will argue the pros of the bill, why it would be beneficial to Nigeria, why it would be beneficial to the respective communities, the interest groups such as farmers, such as even the Nigerians, because that's more food, more affordable food, and arguably how to avoid any environmental concerns have already been taken into consideration, and the respective MDAs as ministries, departments, and agencies have been consulted. And there's a whole functional ecosystem waiting to take on this act if it goes through. Once it's done, other senators, key in, give their arguments for and against. If it goes well, it's read the second time and it's deemed to have been approved in principle. If not, if the arguments against are overwhelming, then it's defeated on the floor, and that's it. You have to see if you either have to start again, make your amendments, or maybe you didn't lobby well enough. So, people just don't think it is time for that bill because the resources are better spent elsewhere. So you have to lobby better or time it better. Now, if it goes to the second reading, it goes to the committee stage. At this stage, in the State House of Assemblies, they all have respective committees which are set up to handle various areas of government and society. So in this case, it would most likely go to the Senate Committee on Agriculture. One key thing or important thing is always good as the sponsor to be a part of that committee, or at least you don't have to be the chairman or vice chairman, but at least be a member, because it's like you have a baby and you are not there to babysit the baby through its various stages. So the committee stage is quite an important stage. So it'll be good for you to be a part of the relevant committee or committees, because sometimes it's more than one committee. They can come together as people from the different committees can form one committee if it's considered that the bill affects several issues. So let's just say the Agriculture Committee, Senate Committee on Agriculture. So once the bill is deliberated, checking the time, at the committee stage, this is my network. Sorry, Nigeria, nothing I can do. But I hope you can at least sort of hear what I'm saying. If at that stage So at the committee stage, that's where there are public hearings. So now this Water for Farmers Foundation and other interested parties, stakeholders in the electricity sector, in the agricultural sector, MDAs, they will all come present their cases for and against. The committee will deliberate on it. That's public hearing. That's where you have public hearings and memos are put out for people to send in their opinions or memos. Once all of that is done and everything goes well, the chairman or chairwoman of the committee would report that, a report will be prepared, and that will be presented to the whole House. That's to the whole Senate. Once that is done, that's the end of the committee and reporting stage. If it is adopted, it goes on to the third reading. At the third reading, the member who is in charge of the sponsor will report the bill to the House, that's the whole House, that the bill has been passed without any amendments, and then you move a motion rather, that the bill be read for the third and final time. Once that is done, the bill has technically been passed in that House temporarily. Since this is the Senate, it has to go to the House of Reps. Now, for equality purposes, all the states agree. Now it has to go to the House of Reps for all the constituencies to agree. That's how you would reason out why there are two houses. So it has to go to the constituencies for them, the federal constituencies, for them to agree. So this is more, the argument here should be based more on the interests of each constituency. So even in the same states, there may be conflicting interests. At this stage, basically a clean copy is sent from the clerk of the Senate to the clerk of the House of Reps. Once that is done, they go through everything again from first reading in that House. Once they get to the final stage, a copy is sent, or a message is sent back to the Senate saying, we have come back and there are no amendments. Once that is done, we go to the assent stage. Sorry, excuse me. So once it comes back, it goes to the president. It goes on for presidential assent. However, if it comes back from the House of Reps and there are some issues within the process, maybe at several stages, there are amendments or there's the complete dissension between the bill that was passed at the Senate and the bill that emerges from the House. If that is done, then obviously the bill cannot go on. They have to stop and have what you call a conference or harmonization committee, where members from both houses, usually who are somehow have committee-related interests. So probably people from the Senate Committee on Agriculture and the House Committee on Agriculture, maybe other committees, though. Basically, a conference committee is formed. Now, the only thing here is you cannot bring in any new amendments. They're only going to address issues based on what was the differences that arose from the House of Reps. Once they're able to either come to some form of agreement or, they have to resolve it. If they don't, the bill fails at that stage. So this is quite a critical stage. Once that is done, then they have to pass both bills again in the two houses. They have to pass, a single copy of that bill. The same exact thing has to be passed in both houses. This can be where you find a lot of mischief sometimes in reality. So as a legislator, you really should be meticulous. You should read the bill at every time it comes back. You have to read it. You don't assume that it's the same thing that you read the last time, because things change. Even things that something as minute as an A can change the meaning of a section or of a law. So it is important to read it every time. So once that is done, there's some form of harmonization. The final copy is signed by the clerk, and it is sent to the president for a presidential assent. At this stage, the president, if he's satisfied, he assents to the bill and the bill becomes an act, or the governor, and then it becomes a law. But if he doesn't assent to it, he either rejects it or he vetoes it. If he rejects it and sends it back, maybe says you guys need to amend some things, and they see the legislative arm sees reason, it's amended. But if not, and he doesn't communicate anything within 30 days, the legislature, National Assembly, has the power to veto the president, which is a legislative veto, by a 2/3 majority of overriding his veto. And that's in the Constitution, Section 58. There are unique differences in certain types of bills. You have a money bill, which is basically the appropriations bill, where our national budgets come from, or the state budgets come from. You have constitutional amendment bill, which, if you recall, throughout last year was a major issue. There are slight differences in the way those bills are passed, but it's because of time. We may not be able to go into that, but they're in the Constitution, and we can check those out. Okay, so now the next slide, oversight, which is the second power. This basically is the power of the legislature over the other arms of government. Remember, we spoke about separation of powers. Now, this is where a big part of the legislative arm of government's power within the separation of powers comes from. Here, they have a constitutional power to oversee the performance, functions, and actions of the executive arm and the judiciary. Please, the next slide. From these pictures, there are several instances of the National Assembly conducting its oversight functions. Please, the next slide. So here you have the investigative powers, evidential powers, power of the purse, impeachment, confirmation, and removal powers. So quickly, investigative powers. Here they have the power to direct or cause to be directed an investigation into matters over which they can legislate, the conduct of executive officials, MDAs charged with the execution of administration of laws, disbursement, and administration of funds appropriated to them by the legislative arm of government, which shows how important the legislative arm of government is, because if you see the one below, they have the power of the purse, which is the power to authorize in a prescribed manner how monies can be withdrawn and expended from the federal and state consolidated revenue fund. So they have a massive role to play in the spending of our funds as a nation and the allocation of funds. Then they have the power to implement the appropriations or budget process through the whole process, that is the appropriations that results in the appropriation bill, which becomes the Appropriations Act, which is our national budget. Then they have the power to audit public accounts of MDAs. Then you have the evidential powers, which is to gather unnecessary evidence and examine all persons who may give material evidence to investigations. They also have the power to summon a person to give evidence, or even they can also issue a warrant to compel a person to attend one of their investigative hearings. And this, in the previous slide, there was a picture of the former acting DG of NTC, and that was a big issue that I think almost everyone in Nigeria heard about it. In that case, he was summoned, and then a warrant was even issued. And this is supposed to be a perfect example of the National Assembly performing its oversight functions, where you came to us to allocate certain funds. The funds were allocated. Where have they gone to? How are they dispersed? How are they utilized? And where is the evidence of the utility? And in the event that proper answers or suitable answers were not or are not given, we as the people should see the implications of that. But do we? Then impeachment, confirmation, and removal of powers. Here we have the removal of president and vice president, the governor, deputy governor, respectively, for misconduct. This is through the impeachment process. Confirmation of the appointment of ministers, commissioners, ambassadors, etc., and also the power to confirm and remove judicial officers. But most of the time, it's in conjunction with another arm of government. So one may recommend, like for example, ministers, the executive will recommend, the legislative arm will confirm. So that shows the distribution of powers. Next slide, please. Okay, last of the three roles is representation. Now, this is, to me, the foundation of the role of a legislator. You are sent there by people to represent them. All other powers, making laws, oversight, etc., they draw from this power. And these pictures here, this is supposed to show you a cross-section of the federal legislative arm of government, which is supposed to represent all Nigerians. So we ask ourselves, as a Nigerian, in your own individual space, just looking at this, do you feel represented? Do you see, because one would argue representation is supposed to be a reflection of the people. Do you see yourself as a young person, as a woman, as a person living with disabilities? Do you see yourself here? That's a question to answer. Next slide, please. So here, this is it's been put forward that there are certain models for representation. You have the delegate model, which is represented by, also called the chameleon model, which in that sense, the elected representative is just delegated the responsibility. So your position would change based on who you are representing, hence the chameleon terminology. So you don't have a mind of your own, arguably. You are just there to represent the interest of your people. So if they wake up today and they say we are capitalist in nature, you go and push for capitalist-related legislation or agendas or policies. If they wake up today and say we are socialist in nature, you have to do what they ask. Then you have the trustee model / statesman. I use General Achebe because represents what a statesman should look like, or at least be. And he, such a representative is elected and entrusted by their voters with the responsibility of governing for all. Such a representative is free to serve the people as they think. So naturally, this would be someone of high intellect who understands the needs of the people they are representing, because they have trusted. You say, you understand us, you know us so well, sir or ma, go and represent us. Then you have the mandate model or party model. This is basically a party-based form of representation. So you do the bidding of your party, not necessarily. This would probably work in a system where there are ideologies. So if you are joining this party, you know what you're joining. So if you join, say, the Green Party, you know you are joining Green Party. You would have to reflect the Green Party principles. If you're joining a Liberal Party, you have to reflect liberal principles and, etc. Then you have the resemblance model or mirror model. Now, this is also back to the question I asked. Here, this is not necessarily about how the representative acts. This is more about how the whole house appears. So this is where an elected body of representatives reflect, or arguably they should reflect, so the society and the different groups within the society in a similar, or at least fair proportion to those that exist in wider. So the House of Assembly or National Assembly, or whatever that country calls their own legislature, would basically be a cross-section of society. So if they were to do a survey and use the National Assembly, the results would be a true reflection of the wider population, because there is close to equal representation in terms of the different groups within that society. Then you have a sample called political model. Now, this is basically a combination of the delegate and trustee model, and obviously the mirror model, because it's seen that sometimes you have to you have to do the bidding of your people, and sometimes you have to take a stand and say, no, I think we're better off doing things this way because you have entrusted me with this office. Next slide, please. So in summary, the representation role as a legislator, you are supposed to listen to the concerns and opinions of your constituents and your constituency members. And you're supposed to articulate them and advocate for their views, concerns, and needs so that they are addressed and resolved through legislation or oversight functions. Then you're supposed to oversee and scrutinize the performance of the executive in implementing projects, utilizing public funds, and the execution of the law. Please, next slide. Because ultimately, the people are sovereign, and that is embedded in the Constitution. Now, if we say we as the people are sending people, because you send people to represent you, that's ultimately what it is supposed to be. No one is doing you a favor. They have come to ask you to buy a product, and that product is as an aspirant or a candidate. I'm saying, look at me. This is what I intend to do. That's your manifesto. This is who I am. That is how you represent yourself every day, what you say, what people who have known you before say about you, what you put up on your website, all of that. So you're selling something. It's really a marketing thing. You're selling a product. In reality, if as a customer you went to a restaurant, McDonald's, Chicken Republic, one of the nice fancy places in wherever part of the country you are or the world you are, if you were served a meal that was off, or that wasn't what you got, you asked for chicken and you got beef, or you told them you're allergic to fish and they gave you food that was cooked in fish oil, you will not eat that food again. If you ate it once, you won't eat it. You won't take a second spoon, because unless you are. But the natural reaction of a human being would be to say, can I speak to the manager? Or you would tell the waiter that brought the food, this is not what I ordered. I was very clear about what I ordered, and your menu said this. Even when you go to a shop and you see a price list, a lot of the time, if maybe which happens a lot in Nigeria today, you see 1,000 naira or 2,000 naira on the, under the product, and you take it to the till and they say, no, madam, this thing is 5,000 naira now. You won't just say, okay, cool, and pay for it. You would argue, say, but this is not what you misrepresented it. I picked it up because I was under the impression that this is what I was going to pay, or this is what I was going to get. That is also how we should feel about those we put in office. You voted them in because you were under the impression, or they sold something to you. After 4 years, if they don't deliver, bye-bye. But somehow, even at the executive level, even in roles that are appointed, people don't resign after poor performance. So the question is, why? That first question, why? These are things we need to ask ourselves, both as the electorate, as people who are aspiring to become public officers, as people who are going to vote in 2023, as people who want to work in the space or with the space. These are questions we have to ask ourselves. Please, next slide. Okay, so as I like quotes, critical mass impact. Now, this is, let's read the quote first. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. This was said by Margaret Mead, an American cultural anthropologist. To me, I believe that until we are able to build critical mass as a people who have the same thinking, the same identity, the same political identity in terms of what we want. This is not even about ideology, this is about the identity. So we can have different ideologies about how we think governance should be run, or how we think politics should be the interest within politics should be. But if we do not have a common identity, this is what we stand for. If you mess up, you're out. As a people, if we know we are powerful within our votes, we know we can come and form a collective, and we are Nigerians, and Nigeria means this to me. Nigeria means that to you. And even if it's a different language, we are comparing notes, and at least the same value is reverberating through whatever it is that is said. Not, oh, what does it mean to be Nigeria? I'm used to Jakpa. That's unfortunately where things are headed and where things are. But until we change the way we see this Nigerian identity, either politically, socially, economically, come together, it may be easier to fight and push for certain things. I didn't say we should incite violence and war when I said fights, please. Next slide. Okay, now, flowing from that, as a collective, we have certain constitutional rights that are embedded in the Constitution and that are supposed to afford us proper representation. One of such rights is the right to participate in the electoral process, to even decide to want to be and join the executive arm of government or join the legislative arm of government. And if neither of those are for you, you have a right to vote to put in or take out those people. The sections are provided. Then you also have the constitutional right to remove a legislator who is performing poorly. Now, this is called the right to recall a legislator. It's section 69 and 110 of the Constitution, depending on if it's a federal or state legislator. The procedure for this is, you have, if a legislator is performing poorly in a so this is constituency based. If a legislator is performing poorly in his or her constituency, half of the registered voters in that constituency, only that constituency, must sign a petition, and that petition must be presented to the chairman of INEC, showing, and as they have to explain and show that they have lost confidence in that legislator. The signatures would have to be verified. So INEC will send officials and they'll verify those signatures. Once that verification process is done, INEC would conduct a referendum within 90 days of receiving of the date of that petition. And the purpose of that referendum is to ensure that that is actually the will of the greater majority in that constituency, because at the end of the day, it's supposed to be a democratic process. So once they're able to get a simple majority, the approval of a simple majority, then that side of the process is done. They'll have to notify the legislator, they'll probably get a response. But if everything is done properly, once that referendum is done and everything else administratively is done, notification, response, blah, 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 the legislator can be recalled. This is in the Constitution. It has been attempted, but the thing with politics is interest. It's arguably difficult to achieve, but it is not impossible. And with the way Nigerians are now, honestly, I think it is very possible at some point. Next slide. So, good governance. Well, according to the United Nations, there are certain principles that determine, or at least you can use to measure good governance in a society. As a legislator, it's important to know these things and know that you should measure your performance and the performance of your legislature, so your assembly, 9th assembly, 8th assembly, based on that. So, for example, if you're a principal officer like the Senate president, it's important to have these things at the back of your mind, because you are now responsible for the collective performance. It should be participatory in nature, but this is more so for the executive arm of government. It should be participatory in nature. It should be consensus oriented. I mean, at least the interests of everybody sort of should have, it equal opportunity to be considered. Obviously, when there are so many competing interests, you can rarely fulfill or satisfy everybody. Even in the smallest situations, it's difficult to satisfy everybody. That it just doesn't happen. But there should be a minimum standard of care. There should be a minimum standard, there should be a minimum duty of care and a minimum standard of care that should be provided to every single citizen in Nigeria. Then naturally, government should be accountable at all levels, the legislative arm, so people should be able to see what their legislators are doing, even if it is not done by the legislature, the legislator should figure out ways to make information accessible to their constituency or their constituency members. It should be transparent, and things that are kind of similar to accountability. If it is transparent, then arguably it will become more accountable, or they will become more accountable. They should be responsive, so they should listen to the needs of the people and respond accordingly. Shouldn't be rigid and fixed in your ways. I think if you do something once or twice and it's not working, you would be wise to change your ways. Then they should be effective and efficient. This is all institutions, all government institutions have a responsibility to be effective and efficient, because this ensures better utilization of resources and addressing of concerns and needs. It should be equitable and inclusive, fair, fairness. People should feel like, every group should feel like they're reflected and they're represented and equally and fairly. Then we should follow the rule of law. Where without rule of law, then there's really no point of the legislative arm of government. Next slide. Oh, and then one more. There's a strategic vision. This is normally not considered under good governance in the public sector, but in the private sector, you always have, sometimes have a dedicated department to it, which their role is just to think of the vision and mission and all those things and come up with long-term, mid-term, and short-term plans. And everything that is done, every naira that is spent is going towards achieving that goal, which is also where cultures are born, sort of organizational cultures or company cultures sometimes are born out of just a plan or a strategic plan. So if you put that on a national scale or a state scale, if there is a buying of the if the process of coming or arriving at a plan or a strategic vision was included the electorate or the constituency members, naturally there would be a buy-in, because they're like, this, I played a role in achieving this or in building this, so that at every level, when the budget is being prepared, when certain bills have been passed, when the executive arm of government is pushing out policies, the people are aware and they have an understanding of, okay, this is towards that vision that we're all working towards in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, 100 years, however long. Usually 50 years max, but you get the general gist. So I think that's also something that is important to include in good governance as it relates to the public sector or government. So now, in conclusion, I would hope at least we know what to do. If you're a legislator or you're hoping to be a legislator, the most important function, as far as I'm concerned, is representation, because everything flows from there. It's if you are aware or you understand what it is to represent people, then when you are thinking of the laws to sponsor, when you're thinking of, or when you're conducting oversight functions, you will feel the duty that I must perform these functions well. I must perform them in the interest of my constituency members, because without constituency members, there's no public office. That's not the appointive ones, the elective ones. There is no public office. There's no one to elect you to that office. So you have a duty to them. As a constituency member, it's important to understand your government, which is part of what this electoral college course as a whole seeks to do. And it's also important to get your PVC. I mean, was already done that, and it's collect when if you don't have one already, and you will collect the card, because even if you've gone through the process of build critical mass within your own locality around you, those in your circle and in
All right, I think our facilitator is having some network challenge. She's going to join us soon. But then we are already coming to the end of the class. Okay, so I get to begin to prepare your questions now. You're just going to go straight to the point, right? If you are called up to ask your question because you're running out of time, just go straight to the point, ask the question you want to ask, and you get your answer. So let's hope she joins us soon. All right, no problem. Just keep your hands up, and if she joins us back, after the rounding up, we can begin to take the questions now. Oh, really? We have a lot of questions. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. I hope she's trying to join back. Wait. Okay, let me confirm from her. Okay, she's going to be with us shortly, okay? Okay, please let's just be here with her. That's the country we are in. We don't have a very stable network. But yes, I know we're going to overcome that challenge. Man, we're gonna have a long class. Okay, let's see exercise little more questions. She's joining us soon. But then for those of you that your hands are up, please keep your hands up. Once you join, I'm going to start calling you. Hi, Maureen, are you here?
Good evening, I'm here. I'm trying
All
to
right,
get
all
through
right.
to her. I'm trying to get through to her. I think our network is bad.
Very well. All right.
Mm.
Okay, so guys, please just exercise very little questions, right? She's going to join us back soon. Okay. So we really apologize for that inconvenience. This is not an intended action. Oh, all right. She's here already. Maureen, can you unmute her from your end and probably make her the co-host?
You have the host right, so you can just make her co-host so she can unmute herself.
All right. Okay, Ma, you are the co-host
Okay.
now, so you can.
Sorry, everyone. Honestly, I don't even know. Today, network has been very bad. I had to change network providers. So I think, yeah, so, I think just to round up, we're already at the end, but identify who your legislator is and, hold them accountable if you have to start from somewhere. First of all, is to know who your from local government, who your chairman is, your councillor is. Then you go to your state level, who your state House of Assembly member is, who you most likely know who your governor is, but there are so many people in between that either make your government function properly or not. Then at the federal level, who your federal legislators are. But the main thing is to ask your candidates the right question, because before they become your legislators or your executive heads of the executive arm of government, there are opportunities, or at least we're beginning to see opportunities where we can address or pose questions or ask questions or think about what their manifestos are available, at least beginning to become available. Ask questions there, but the thing is, before you even get to that stage, we also have to hope for the candidates that emerge to be the right candidates. So I think the process is from the beginning. It starts with us, really. You start from the roots, and that's at the local government level, and that's in terms of the tiers of government, but then it's also at the electorate, because from there comes the people who vie for office. And from there is where we choose our candidates. And from there is where we choose the people who end up in the respective offices. So we can't just wake up when it's time to vote for one candidate or the other. We should be there from the beginning. The more of us who are there at the beginning, who gets involved at the beginning from the local level, in the terms of the tiers, state level, federal level, then those who get involved as the electorate, you're involved in the business, the political business of your constituency, then maybe things would start to shift. Then obviously vote on election day, and not just one election, vote on all the days when you have to do local government vote, when you have to vote for your state's House of Assembly member and the governor vote, when you have to vote for president and House of Rep members vote. You don't just pick the one because you feel that's the one, or you think plays a vice, the local government and state level. That's where things are. It's the decentralized, the actions of those layers really determine the type of community or constituency you live in. So it's your constitutional rights at the end of the day. So thank you. Next slide, which is the last, just a quote, at least to leave you with. If I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's fantasies for me and eaten alive. Andrea Lord said that she was a civil rights activist and a writer, among so many other things. But I think we can take that as a collective. If we don't define ourselves for ourselves, if we don't define the type of Nigeria we want for ourselves, or the type of representation we get for ourselves, then those who are there would, eat us alive. And arguably, that's what has been happening. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. I feel there was a lot of network issues. That was beyond my control. I apologize. But thank you for listening. Over to you.
Wow. Yeah, thank you so much for this awesome class. It was so much an eye-opening, yeah, and we have a lot of questions already. Okay, guys, how we're going to do it, right? Please, because you don't have time, just go straight to the point. If I call you for your question, go straight to the point, okay? And if you notice that maybe someone else have asked the question that you wanted to ask, okay, so please just put down your hand, don't repeat the question again. This is for us to be able to save time, right? So I'm just going to go with the first person here, Carlo Innocent Juna. I'm going to unmute you right now to ask your question. Carlo Innocent Juna. You can unmute yourself and ask a question now. Thank you. Please just straight to the point. Carlo Innocent Juna. Okay, Aminu Adam. Aminu, let me unmute so that you ask your question. So Aminu, you can ask your question now. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much, Nella. That was quite enlightening. And of course, I want to especially say thank you once again for giving us the lecture on the legislature. And also happy birthday to Lisa. Like the moderator said, I will go straight to the question. I want to talk about the separation of powers in the executive, in the arms of government. And I'm wondering why that the separation of power is not so effective in the Nigerian system of government. I would like you to give me an insight into that. Then secondly, I want to ask you, why is it that Nigeria is a country of many laws, but the laws are not effective? And the third one, well, that has skipped me, but first, kindly answer these two for me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. My answer might not be what everyone may want to hear, but I think a big part of it is the people. And when I say the people, as I said, those who represent us are pulled from us. They're not random people that just fly in and say, "Oh, I'm now your legislator, your governor, your president." They come from among us. So in terms of separation of powers, why we would say it is not as effective here is because of, I think, the way we respond to rules and regulations and boundaries as a people. So if, generally speaking, we don't, because the laws, the Constitution, there are actually provisions for separation of powers. It may not be perfect, but the Constitution provides for those separation of powers. And even as you saw in the document, the slides, there is a whole staff oversight section. The bottom corner shows a lot of the roles that the legislative arm of government plays in terms of separation of powers. It has the power to remove certain executive officers as well as judiciary, obviously in conjunction with the other arm. So that's separation of powers. But in a society where we are not familiar, or we have chosen to become indifferent to accountability and doing the right thing when or living with the consequences of our actions. 1, 2, knowing that this boundary, I cannot cross it, because if I cross it, there will be consequences. This is the role of this arm of government. This is the role of this arm of government. This is the role of my neighbor. This is where my neighbor parks his or her car. I cannot just park my car. My guests cannot park their car here and just walk into the house because we own Nigeria, or is it not for everybody, or is this not my chance to take a piece of the pie? My answer may not be everybody's answer, but I think I like to reduce things to the why. Then we can go into the technical legal side of things. Yes, some things in the Constitution need to be changed, but even as it is, if we as a people just change the approach to things, then a legislator will know that when I am in office, it is my responsibility to properly conduct oversight. If I go to inspect an airport that we passed the legislation for, the appropriations bill is a legislation in November, and we allocated so and so amount to build this airport in this place. We go there to inspect the airport, me and the rest of my committee as the chairman. We go there to inspect the airport with the MDAs responsible. We sit down, we have several meetings, we look at the airport, we see that the escalator is not working. We see that it is overly, it is bigger than it needs to be. So, or it is smaller than it needs to be. Where did the funds go if it is too small? Why were those funds expended in such a way? And if they don't answer properly, consequences. But until we're able to perform those functions without being so burdened by interests, because I think that's a word that we like, interest. Until we are able to perform those functions independent of that interest and just get the job done, then we will see separation of powers work perfectly. I think politics is in the home. You see it in the house. You have separate powers. This person knows this is their role. This person knows this is their role. When people start crossing boundaries or take liberties or feel I can't, I can do what I want because it's my house, or I can do what I want because it's my community, everything just gets watered down and compromises and things come up. So I think that kind of answers the two questions, unless you don't feel I have. So thank you. And any dissenting opinion, we are free to can discuss it.
All right, thank you so much. Aminu, I hope your question has been answered, right? Okay, I saw some people talking about the slide. I think the slide has already been shared with you at the Telegram group. Okay, but then that's not the thing to worry. You are going to have the slide, okay, even if it has not been shared, maybe after the class.
Yeah,
okay,
so just to, sorry, Gotten, just to because someone asked the question about that. The slides that were provided earlier were more detailed, so they're more like, I guess, textbook slides with more information, but this was more for the presentation. But because a lot of people have asked for them, and I think they were, because of network, we weren't very clear, these slides will be made available as well. So, but they are almost the same thing.
All right, thank you. So guys, the slide will be made available to you, okay? We're going to get to the next person. Okay, Harry, please go straight to the point, okay? Just ask the question. Thank you. Okay, Harry, I've asked you to.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening,
Yeah,
please.
good evening.
Yeah, this is Harry. Yeah, this is Harry, okay, speaking from Delta State. I want to thank Nella, please, for this class and all the facilitators that have put this program in place. Along the line, I penciled down the question that I intend to ask, but as you were talking, you almost answered the questions. And the question is, if there is any measure we can put in place to correct all these abnormalities that our representatives are putting up with, as against representing the constituents rather than representing themselves and taking to the principle of the political parties that sponsor them to their various positions. Now, when you were talking, you said we could come up with something, but along the line, I lost that because of poor network. I had you to the point of getting to INEC, and about 60% of the constituents had to sign with the authentic signatures, and that point, I lost that. Please, I want a better clarification so I can get the whole answer to the question, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. And okay, so that was when I was talking about the constitutional rights to proper representation. So one of the things I said was the right to recall your legislator at both levels. That's section 69 for the national legislators and section 110 for your state legislators. So for that, I said, if a constituency or the members of the constituency feel that their legislature is not performing, half of the registered voters, that's 50%, well, plus one, half of the registered voters have to sign a petition and present that to the chairman of INEC, and it must show that they have lost confidence in that legislator. Then INEC will come to the locality or the constituency rather and verify those signatures to make sure they are not some false ones, or just to meet up with the numbers. Then, and this is people that registered, not necessarily the people that voted. This is total number of people registered. So that's on the INEC register of voters for that constituency. Then once the signatures are verified of the 50% or half, INEC would conduct a referendum again in that constituency 90 days after they receive that petition, to get the approval for the petition by a simple majority of those registered voters. And in such a situation, once that is done and they get the simple majority approving the petition, the legislator will be recalled. Obviously, there will be some administrative things. They will have to notify him or her. The person will have to at least respond and all. But once you get to, because while all of that is going, those administrative things will be going on. So once they get the simple majority, the person gets recalled. So I was saying that is provided in the Constitution, that boils down to the question, my answer to the previous question. It stems from us. The Constitution, maybe people say it is not, yes, it may not be perfect, but as bad as it is, if you want to say that, there are provisions that secure the people. They are there. There are provisions that we can use. There's provisions for us to do what we need to do to be properly represented. It is up to us, and it's up to us who are there to do good by Nigeria and Nigerians. So, that's that provision. So that's one of the powers you have as an electorate or a member of a constituency, which is why you need to know who your legislator is. If you have not seen them in a few days in the house, start counting down. And if you can whip up enough votes, you can at least you try it. Anyway, I think that answers that question.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Okay. I think your question has been answered. All right. So just two people asked a similar question in the slide. I'm just going to read it out before I call the next person. That's Kelechi Wanasike and Choma. I say, thank you, Nella, for the informative section. Please share the timeline between each bill review process upon introduction. And Choma asked the same question in a very different manner. I say, please, is there a time frame attached to each reading of the bill in the House of Rep and Senate? Okay, ma, please, can you do justice to that then? Go.
Okay, no, the short answer, no, there isn't, which is why you have bills that are in the on the docket for years.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Kelechi Wanasike, I hope your question has been answered. Yeah.
If you also just to say, you have some you have bills that that originated for the first time in the 7th Assembly and are still in the process because they don't just spill over. You have to start again.
Wow.
So it's good.
Right.
I mean, 4 years arguably is enough time to deal with something. I would say you can handle certain things in less than 3 months if you just hammer on. But who am I? I'm not a legislator.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, TV King Chukuka, please go ahead and ask your question. I've asked you to unmute. Please just go straight to the point.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Nella, for this comprehensive class. I want to ask, every electioneering period, there's always this debate about a certificate that keeps popping up. So I want to ask, like you said, the qualification is stated in section 65. So I want a little bit of clarification here. Does that section say that the candidate must have a senior school certificate, or does it say the person must have attempted, or does it say the person must know how to read and write? Because every time there's an election, this debate keeps popping up. So I want to really understand, what does that section say about the candidate when it talks about certificates and qualification? Thank you.
For the sake of grammar, I will just read it to you. This is the Constitution. It says, a person shall be qualified for election under subsection 1, that's section 65, if he has been educated up to at least school certificate level or its equivalent. That's the language in the Constitution. So it's if he or she has been educated up to that level. But in interpretation of law, you have to prove that you have been educated up to a certain level. Because I can say, I have a PhD. I have a level school certificate. Oh, no, I went to secondary school. See my mates here, see my mates here, see my mates there. they could all be your guys who are waiting for you to enter. So there needs to be something to show that. I mean, I don't think the Constitution had to spell it out. And why it's, arguably, why it's said has been to is over time, the mode of proving qualification could change. And the Constitution, as we know, is the ground, and that's the foundation. So if it is so specific about what has to be provided, because it could say has to show liver school certificate, then that becomes a problem. Because let's say some education minister comes in, or Nigeria changes, and we feel we need to switch up the way we are educating our kids, and it's no more a liver school. You may even have that first school, you may write the exams, the same exams, but the document that's given to you is different. Trust me, a lawyer will take that matter to court. So that's why it's, well, that I would argue that that's why it's written like that. But there needs to be a document to show that. So to answer your question, yes, there should be a certificate to show when you go through screening and all those processes. When you even at the beginning, when you submit your form, it's a pack, and there are itemized requirements that you are supposed to show. Your various school certificates, minimum level being that the school level certificate or its equivalent, because some people may not have, for example, schooled in Nigeria or schooled in received that form of education. I think that's also that point. It may change over the years. So, but you are supposed to submit a certificate of some sort that shows you have achieved or attained qualification up to that stage, which is secondary school. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chukwuka TV King. I hope your question has been answered. So guys, class will end by 7 p.m. on the dot, right? So maybe in case your question, maybe I'm not able to call you to ask a question, you can drop it on the Telegram, or you can send it to me or anybody, and it will get to the facilitator to answer you, right? Okay, Carlo Innocent Jonah, I've asked you to unmute. Please, straight to the point, just shoot. Don't greet anybody. Hello.
Sorry, we can't hear you.
We cannot hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Okay, we are struggling.
I think so.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
I said I have been engaged with a House of Representatives who told us that they are not meant to construct road. So I want to know, and we've lived with that for a couple of years, that House of Rep don't construct road. That's one. And then two, most times we are mostly confused between the work of the rep and the senator. Is the rep a kind of assistant to the senator, or what is their major difference, and what is their major work apart from making of bills at the federal level, coming down to the grassroots where we are? What is their fundamental duties between the two of them?
Okay, thank you. I think I kind of touched on both questions in the presentation, but quickly, the first question, is the legislator supposed to build a road? No. So yes, she's not lying to you. She's not supposed to build a road. She has the money and she wants to do it out of her own magnanimity, probably whatever that word is. Sure, she can. But as a legislator, it's not that person's responsibility to build a road. However, there are oversight functions. So it is someone's responsibility to build that road, whether at the federal or state level. It is someone in the executive's responsibility to ensure that a road, a public road, the constituency members can access that road to both ends of that road. And money is probably will probably and has probably been allocated to pave that road. So the legislator has a responsibility to scrutinize and ask questions. Every year you come, and I'm sure the budget for that locality, there is an inclusion under probably either the packet for the Ministry of Transportation, as the part of the budget that's for Ministry of Transportation or Public Works or something that says, or it could even be under a community, the community projects, what's that? Anyway, there's probably a financial allocation that has been given over time for that road or those roads. And as the person representing that constituency, he or whoever should have asked at some point when you're having public hearings, when people are coming, when MDAs are defending the budget, you should ask them, this road, see the picture from last year, from the year before, what happened? When they are doing oversights, they may go to that locality or the constituency and they'll ask, but this road became last year. You said an award was given to a constructor, to a construction company to do it. What has happened? So no and yes, they have a responsibility to follow up and oversee, but they don't have a responsibility to build that road. It is not their job description. So you cannot say, why haven't you fixed my road? Which is why they will never answer you. It's not my work. Then the second question was, sorry, I forget.
The
Sorry,
second
can you
question
remind
is
me?
the difference between the House of Rep members and the
Yes,
senators.
I
Like,
also
is there a
touched on that.
difference?
There's really, in terms of the work that they do, they are legislators, but I know I said one is really about representing the equality of the states, the Senate. So there are 3 per state. They have to represent the quality of the state, while one is truly to represent each constituency, because in some states you can have 8 constituencies, in another state you have 10 constituencies, 7, 4. So if all states have the same, maybe just one House, Senate, and you have 3, some people will not be properly represented. So there will be. Then in terms of the functions, as a legislator in the Senate, you should be looking out for the interest of your state through, of your senatorial district through your state. While at the House of Reps, you should be looking out for your own constituency, also through your state and the broader Nigeria. But in terms of functions, they also serve to check each other, which is why bills go from one house to the other. Policy reviews and things go from one house to the other. So they have their legislative function is they both pass bills, both to conduct oversight, both perform representative roles, but there are differences. I hope that helps.
All right, so Bishop, I hope your question has been answered. And unfortunately, guys, this is the last question I'm going to take. Okay, so I'm so sorry if I'm not able to call you, but then the chats in the Telegram groups are open, and you also be shared into different groups, right? Where you have a facilitator in those groups, then the questions can continue from there, right? So I'm going to call Zoomji Daniel. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce the name very well. Zoomji, I've asked you to unmute. Just go straight to the point. Thank you.
Okay. My question is, I noticed you've been using one word, lobbying. So I just want to get the full scope of it. What's the difference between lobbying, bidding, and bribery? Is it what does it entail? You said you lobby for it. I just kept you here making that statement. So what happens in the lobbying? Is it bribery? Is it bidding, or what? Let's get the differences and Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Zoomji. Hello.
I was muted. I was saying with bidding, it's usually if there's a contract. No, that's not in the scope of legislative work. It's a bid is usually put forward by a contractor or someone who's trying to get a job. So you bid for that contract, you bid for that award, blah, blah, blah. Bribing is a completely different thing. That's, you usually you're exchanging favor, like financial favor for personal interest, or, so that's illegal. Lobbying, there have been a lot of arguments regarding lobbying because some people think it is wrong in terms of, they say it may be like bribing. But in the sense I am referring to, lobbying is within legislators. I know I use the word lobbying within legislators. As a legislator who wants to sponsor a bill, you can lobby a fellow legislator and say, look, this is what the bill I'm selling with this bill, in sense, this is what it's going to do, these are the benefits. It could benefit your community, your constituency too. It could benefit the greater good of the people, the economic benefits. You're going for a rerun eventually. Wouldn't you want your people to say you've done good if you are seen as a co-sponsor of this bill and if you vote for the bill? For example, even when there's some constitutional things, there was a lot of lobbying within the legislative arms because people are trying to get others to vote for one way or the other within the constitution. And most of it is, look, it will be in your own interest to do this because at some point you are going to come back, that's the fact, and ask me to support your own bill. Like if all else fails, you cannot convince someone to vote for something that you really believe in and you think it's beneficial to that person. You say, okay, look, at the end of the day, that's what we are here for, to do the bidding of our people. I use the word bidding, but these are just big terms. Do the bidding of our people. You're supposed to, if you don't see reason, you're going to want me to vote for something at the end of the day. And if there are issues, then we will keep coming at logheads. Now, ideology is also coming to play, but in Nigeria, now lobbying from the outside, that tends to be when, like I said, that Not Too Young to Run, perfect example, Not Too Young to Run act, that didn't just come out of nowhere. CSOs came together and lobbied because they went to the legislative and spent time there convincing, saying, look, this is in the interest of your constituency, this is in the interest of your younger brother. You figure out ways to sell it. Say, this will benefit people, this will that, this is why you should sponsor this bill, this is why you should. That is a form of lobbying. In some places, in other countries where you have like what they call super PACs, and these are like groups of interest groups. So maybe the big pharma, that's the pharmaceutical companies, or maybe now you have big tech companies, they will come as that institution to lobby legislators to push legislation that makes the business environment convenient for them. Now, a lot of legislators, like you have AOC, who says she doesn't get any money from big pharma or any of those super PACs. She gets money from individual donations. That tends to come because a lot of the time, if you get sponsorship or your campaigns are sponsored by big or those sort of lobbyist groups, chances are they will put pressure on you when the decision-making season comes, passing bills. And that can now be be problematic for the legal process. So there are a lot of gray areas, but why it can never be, or it has never been made fully illegal, is because you need lobbying. You need to convince people to. It's in politics is interest. There are a lot of competing interests and needs and benefits and disadvantages. And sometimes you need to convince people to see the reason. So I don't know. I hope that helps. Trying to be as quick as possible. Hello, Godson.
Okay, I think Godson has gone off from his network,
Okay.
probably. Yes. Thank you so much, Nella. It's been a very insightful class as usual. A lot of people still have questions, but unfortunately our time is up. But here's what we can do. We can continue the conversation on Telegram. And of course, like we said earlier, you'll be shared into groups. You can also continue the conversation there. Nella will be on all the groups. She's the Deputy Executive Director. She'll be on all the groups. Likewise, so you can ask your questions there. Yes. So thank you all for staying with us. It's been a very enlightening 2 hours. Thank you for giving your time and attending to this class. We'll meet same time tomorrow, 5 p.m. for another very, very interesting class, I promise you. Yeah, so thank you all. Thank you for the birthday wishes. I saw it all. Thank you and amen to the prayers. Thank you all. All right, DED, once more, thank you. I'll just allow the students to
Thank you,
mute
everyone.
so they could just tell you thank you before we call it an evening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
for listening.
Thank you.
We are grateful. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, have a good evening, everyone. Meet same time tomorrow.
All right, ma'am.
Thank you, Nella. That was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. We'll catch up tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.